A lion challenged a wounded tiger for territory. What happened next left the rangers in tears. Blood pooled beneath the tiger's flank, dark and glistening against the pale dust of the riverbank. Her breathing came in ragged pulls, each exhale a shudder that rippled through her striped body. The wire snare had cut deep into her hind leg during the night, and when Shed finally torn free at dawn, Shed left something of herself behind, not just flesh, but the fluid grace that made her apex. Now she lay in the thin shade of an acacia, her golden eyes half closed, watching the wavering heat lines dance across the savanna she'd claimed as her own 3 months ago. She didn't see the lion until his shadow fell across her face. He stood 15 feet away, his mane dark with morning dew, his body tense with the electric stillness that precedes violence. Their eyes met. The tiger's lips pulled back, revealing canines stained with her own blood. The lion's tail flicked once, twice. Neither moved. The wind died. And in that silence, something passed between them that had no name in the language of predators. Something that would reshape the territory, the season, and 2 lives that should have ended each other. Wait before the next revelation happens. If this bond between these creatures has already touched you, tell us where you're watching from. To witness every act of courage, every impossible friendship, and every silent miracle of nature, subscribe and join our circle. The next moment will change everything. Now, back to the wild. Part 1. The Incident and the Proposition. The Bandhavgarh Conservation Zone existed in a space between worlds. Not quite India's managed tiger reserves, not quite Africa's vast savannas, but a controversial experiment in ecosystem integration that had begun 7 years ago. Here, in 1,200 square kilometers of mixed habitat, scientists had introduced African megafauna to study behavioral adaptation and competition dynamics. The project had its critics, but it had also produced unprecedented data on predator interaction. Asha had been born here, one of 5 cubs to a Bengal tigress who'd learned to hunt the antelope and zebra that grazed alongside Chital and Sambar. She'd never known the forests of traditional tiger country. Her territory encompassed 30 square kilometers of riverine woodland and open grassland, a patchwork kingdom she'd fought her sisters to claim. The snare had been set by poachers who didn't discriminate between protected species. They wanted skin, bones, teeth, whatever the black market would buy. Asha had been stalking a water buck at dusk when her hind leg found the wire. The pain had been instant and absolute, a white-hot cinch that tightened with every movement. She'd roared, a sound that carried 3 kilometers and sent every creature within earshot into frozen silence. For 6 hours she'd struggled, her massive muscles working against industrial cable, until finally, in a frenzy of strength born from pure survival instinct, she'd torn free. The cost was evident in the deep laceration that ringed her left hind leg, cutting through fur, skin, and into muscle. She'd limped back to her core territory, leaving a blood trail that told a story any predator could read. By dawn, she'd reached the acacia grove near the seasonal river, a place she'd marked as her own with claw marks and scent. She'd collapsed there as the sun rose, her body beginning the slow process of shock and healing, her mind retreating into the half-consciousness that comes when pain overwhelms all other input. That's when Raja found her. The lion was 6 years old, in his prime, a coalition male who'd been displaced from his birth pride by his own father and 2 younger males. Had wandered the conservation zone for months, a nomad testing boundaries, assessing weaknesses. He'd watched Asha from a distance, noting her hunting patterns, her territorial markers, her solitary nature. Tigers didn't form prides, they held land alone. That made them vulnerable in ways lions understood instinctively. When Raja scented blood that morning, his first thought was opportunity. A wounded tiger meant available territory. It meant water access, good hunting grounds, shade groves, all the resources a lone male needed. He followed the blood trail with the patient inevitability of his kind, his heavy paws leaving prints twice the size of the tiger's in the dust. He expected to find a carcass. Instead, he found resistance. Asha's eyes opened fully when his shadow crossed her. The pain in her leg was a constant scream, but fear and fury overrode it. She pushed herself up on her front legs, her hindquarters remaining low, unable to support her weight properly. Her growl started deep in her chest, building to a snarl that exposed every tooth in her mouth. Blood dripped from her leg onto the ground between them. Raja stopped. His tactical mind, shaped by years of coalition warfare and territorial disputes, assessed the situation with brutal clarity. She couldn't run. She could barely stand. One rush, one bite to the spine or throat, and the territory would be his. He'd killed before. Rivals, cubs that weren't his own, even a young leopard that had been foolish enough to challenge him over a kill. Death was neither good nor evil in his world. It was function. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the way she held her ground despite the obvious agony. Perhaps it was the recognition of something in her eyes, not fear, but a kind of fierce dignity that mirrored his own. Or perhaps it was simply that she looked so utterly defeated by circumstance rather than by battle, and some deep instinct told him there was no honor in finishing what humans had started. They stared at each other for 3 full minutes. Asha's front legs trembled with effort. Raja's tail continued its slow, contemplative flicking. Finally, he did something that would baffle the rangers when they later reviewed the footage from the hidden trail camera 40 meters away. He stepped back. Not a retreat, not submission, just space. Then he turned and walked to the river's edge, 20 meters distant, and drank. Asha watched him, her body still rigid with defensive tension, her mind trying to process this deviation from every instinct she possessed. Lions and tigers didn't share. They didn't coexist. They killed each other for resources. She'd seen it happen once before, when a young male lion had ambushed a tiger at a waterhole. The fight had been savage and brief. But Raja wasn't attacking. He was simply there, drinking. His mane caught the morning light, turning it into a halo of gold and copper. His movements were relaxed, almost deliberately casual, as if he were alone. When he finished drinking, he walked, not toward her, but parallel to her position, to a termite mound 15 meters away. There, in a spot with a clear view of both the river and Asha's acacia grove, he laid down in the loose, boneless way of a cat in no danger. His head remained up, his eyes half open, his posture that of a sentinel rather than a threat. Asha's snarl faded to a low growl, then to heavy breathing. The adrenaline that had flooded her system began to ebb, and with it came a wave of exhaustion so profound she could barely keep her eyes open. Her leg throbbed with her heartbeat. Flies were already gathering at the wound. She wanted to move away from him, to retreat deeper into her territory, but her body wouldn't obey. The best she could manage was to lower herself back down into the shade, her eyes never leaving the lion, her muscles coiled for a defense she wasn't sure she could mount. The morning stretched into afternoon. The sun climbed and the heat became oppressive. Neither predator moved. Raja dozed in brief intervals, always waking to check on the tiger. Asha drifted in and out of consciousness, fever beginning to set in from the infected wound. Around 3 in the afternoon, something changed. Asha's eyes had been closed for nearly an hour when a sound brought her back to awareness. The grunting, shuffling approach of something large. She raised her head to see a sounder of warthogs emerging from the brush near the river, moving in their comical flag-tailed trot toward the water. Hunting was impossible in her condition. She could barely stand, let alone chase. But her stomach was empty, and the sight of prey triggered an automatic response. She tried to push herself up, failed, tried again. Raja was already moving. He'd been watching the warthogs for several minutes, his body lowering into a hunting crouch while Asha slept. Now he moved with the explosive speed of a creature designed for the sprint and ambush. The warthogs scattered, but Raja had already chosen his target, a juvenile at the edge of the group, slower than its siblings. The chase lasted 15 seconds. The kill was quick, professional. A bite to the back of the neck, a snap, stillness. Raja stood over his kill, breathing hard, his eyes moving to where Asha lay watching. She'd managed to prop herself up on her front legs again, her eyes fixed on the dead warthog with an intensity born of hunger and desperation. What happened next would later be analyzed by behaviorists, debated in academic papers, and used as evidence both for and against the conservation zone's experimental protocols. Raja, who had every reason and right to defend his kill, who was programmed by millions of years of evolution to guard resources with violent jealousy, picked up the warthog by the neck and dragged it toward the tiger. Not all the way to her, that would have been submission, an invitation to dominance, but halfway, to neutral ground between his termite mound and her acacia tree. There he dropped it and stepped back, his eyes meeting hers in what could only be called an offering. Asha didn't move immediately. Her mind struggled to categorize this behavior. It had no precedent in her experience. Lions didn't share kills with tigers. Males didn't provision females unless they were pride members, mates, or cubs. This made no sense. But hunger made sense. The smell of fresh blood made sense. And slowly, painfully, Asha began to drag herself toward the carcass. Every movement sent lightning bolts of agony through her leg. She had to stop twice, panting, before she reached the warthog. Raja had retreated to his mound. He watched as she began to feed, her powerful jaws tearing into flesh with the desperate efficiency of a starving predator. She ate for 20 minutes, consuming as much as her shrunken stomach could hold, before exhaustion forced her to stop. She dragged herself back to her shade, blood on her muzzle, leaving the rest of the carcass behind. Raja waited another 10 minutes before approaching the remains. He fed quickly, efficiently, his eyes constantly checking on the tiger. When he'd had his fill, he dragged the carcass to the riverbank and left it there. An invitation to scavengers, a way to clear the space between them of the tension that surrounded contested resources. Sunset came in shades of amber and violet. The heat broke. Asha's fever intensified, making her shiver despite the warmth. Raja remained at his post on the termite mound, a dark silhouette against the dying light. That night he roared. But not the territorial roar of challenge and claim, but something else, a deeper, more resonant sound that carried across the grassland like a warning and a declaration both. Asha, drifting in fever dreams, heard it and understood on some primal level what he was doing. He was announcing presence. He was marking this space as occupied by a dominant predator. He was, in essence, creating a buffer of fear around the wounded tiger, warning other threats to stay away. The proposition, though neither could have named it as such, was now established. She needed protection. He had claimed the role of protector. What had started as a simple decision not to kill had evolved into something far more complex. The rangers would discover them 2 days later, when Asha's tracking collar finally sent an alert about her immobility. They would find the blood trail, the snare marks, the infection. They would also find the lion, still maintaining his vigil from the termite mound, and they would make the difficult decision to intervene medically, while somehow preserving whatever strange detente had formed between two animals that should have been mortal enemies. But that was still to come. For now, as the stars emerged and the night sounds of the savannah built their familiar symphony, a wounded tiger and a wandering lion lay 20 meters apart in an uneasy peace that defied everything the wild had taught them about survival. Part 2. The Labyrinth of Instinct. Dr. Sarah Chen had been the chief veterinary officer for the Bandhavgarh Conservation Zone for 4 years. She'd treated countless injuries, illnesses, and trauma cases across multiple species. She'd seen territorial battles, mating injuries, even the aftermath of illegal hunting attempts. But she'd never seen anything like the scene that greeted her team when they arrived at the riverbank on the 3rd day of Asha's ordeal. The tiger was in obvious distress, fevered, dehydrated, the wound on her leg swollen and oozing. Her collar's biometric data had been alarming for 48 hours before they could organize the intervention team. They'd expected to find her alone, possibly near death. Instead, they found her guarded. Raja stood between the approaching vehicles and Asha's resting place, his body language unmistakable. Not aggressive, but absolutely firm. The message was clear: approach at your own risk. "That's Raja," Kedar, the senior ranger, said quietly from the driver's seat. "Coalition male, displaced about 6 months ago. He's been ghost-tracking this territory, but never claimed it because of her." Sarah studied the lion through binoculars. His condition was excellent: well-fed, healthy coat, alert eyes. He showed no signs of battle injury or illness. "He's protecting her," she said, more to herself than to Kedar. "That's not possible." And yet, the tranquilizing operation required unprecedented coordination. They had to sedate both animals, Asha for treatment, Raja to ensure the safety of the team and the tiger herself. The doses were calculated, the darts loaded. Sarah insisted on using the minimum effective dosage for Raja. She wanted him conscious again as soon as possible, though she couldn't have explained why if pressed. Both darts found their marks. Asha dropped within 3 minutes, her fevered body offering little resistance to the chemicals. Raja lasted 7 minutes, fighting the sedation with visible distress, his eyes never leaving the tiger, even as his legs began to buckle. When he finally went down, his body positioned itself toward Asha, protective even in unconsciousness. The medical team worked with frantic efficiency. Asha's wound was worse than they'd feared. Deep tissue damage, infection tracking up toward her lymph nodes, the beginning of sepsis. Sarah debrided the wound, administered broad-spectrum antibiotics, fluids, anti-inflammatories. They took blood samples, checked her overall condition, treated minor scrapes and abrasions they found elsewhere on her body. "She's been stressed for a while," Priya, the junior vet, observed. "Look at her coat condition. These scars on her shoulder, territorial fights?" "Probably with her sisters," Kedar said. "This territory used to belong to their mother. When she died last year, they fought for it. Asha won, but barely." Sarah worked in silence, her hands steady despite the profound strangeness of the situation. 40 meters away, Raja lay motionless, his chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of sedation. The team had checked him briefly, taken vitals, confirmed he was healthy, left him otherwise undisturbed. "We need to decide," Priya said. "Do we move her to the medical facility?" It was the logical choice. Asha needed intensive care, wound management, continued antibiotics. The facility had everything required to save her life. But something made Sarah hesitate. She looked at the lion, then back at the tiger, then at the termite mound where Raja had apparently been maintaining his watch. "How long were they like this?" she asked Kedar. "Trail camera caught them 3 mornings ago. We've been reviewing the footage. He hunted twice, shared both kills, never approached her directly, never challenged her, just stayed." Sarah made a decision that would later be questioned by the ethics board, supported by behavioral scientists, and ultimately vindicated by outcomes. "We treat her here, daily visits if necessary, but we don't separate them." Sarah, I know it's unorthodox, I know it's risky, but something is happening here that we don't understand, and I'm not willing to destroy it out of convenience. They left Asha with wound packing, a long-acting antibiotic injection, subcutaneous fluids, and a prayer. They also left something else, a camera trap, carefully concealed, positioned to capture whatever would happen next. Raja woke first. His head came up slowly, his eyes blinking away the chemical fog. The first thing he did was look for the tiger. Asha was still unconscious, lying where the team had left her, but her breathing was steadier, her body positioned more comfortably. The scent of humans and medicine was everywhere, triggering unease. He stood, unsteady at first, and walked to where Asha lay. He circled her once, sniffing carefully, his nose working to understand what had changed. The wound on her leg was cleaned and bandaged. Strange textures, foreign smells, but underneath it all, she smelled more herself. The sour scent of infection was muted. When Asha finally woke, 2 hours after Raja, her first sensation was the absence of pain, or rather, its reduction from a scream to a manageable throb. Her mind was clearer than it had been in days. She lifted her head to find the lion sitting 3 meters away, watching her with an expression she couldn't interpret. She tried to stand. Her leg buckled, but not as catastrophically as before. The bandage held. She could put weight on it, though every instinct told her to keep it elevated. After 3 attempts, she managed to get all 4 feet under her, swaying but upright. Raja stood as well, his posture neutral, his tail still. They regarded each other in the afternoon light, 2 apex predators, separated by meters and united by something neither fully understood. Over the following days, a pattern emerged. The rangers came every morning to check on Asha, to change her bandages, to administer medication. Raja allowed it, retreating to his termite mound during the interventions, but always watching, always vigilant. As soon as the vehicles departed, he would return to his position between the tiger and the wider world. He hunted twice more in that first week, an impala, a young water buck, and both times he shared the kills with Asha. The portions were never equal. He took the majority, as his size demanded, but he left enough for her to maintain strength. She accepted this with a pragmatism born of necessity, though her pride clearly chafed at the dependency. On the 6th day, something changed. Asha managed to walk from her acacia tree to the river on her own. The journey took 15 minutes and left her panting with effort, but she made it. She drank deeply, the first time she'd accessed water without human intervention since the snaring. Raja watched from the bank, his body relaxed. When she finished drinking, instead of returning directly to her tree, she did something unexpected. She walked, slowly, painfully, but deliberately, toward Raja's termite mound. He stood as she approached, his ears forward, his body tense with uncertainty. She stopped 3 meters from him, close enough to be within striking distance, close enough to be a statement. Then she lowered herself to the ground, favoring her injured leg, and simply stayed there. Not a challenge, not submission, acceptance. Raja watched her for several minutes, processing this new dynamic. Then he lay down as well, maintaining the 3-meter distance, both of them in the shade of the mound. They slept through the afternoon heat like that, two solitary predators sharing space in violation of every territorial instinct either possessed. The camera trap captured it all. When Sarah reviewed the footage that evening, she felt tears sting her eyes for reasons she couldn't fully articulate. "They're choosing this," she whispered to Priya. "She could leave now. Her leg is healing. She could retreat deeper into her territory, but she's staying near him. And he could kill her still," Priya added. "She's vulnerable, but he's not pressing the advantage." "What do we call this?" Sarah asked. "It's not friendship. That's too human. It's not pair bonding. They're not mating. It's not coalition behavior. They're different species."
"Maybe it doesn't need a name," Kedar said from behind them. "Maybe it just needs to be allowed to exist." But the wild had other ideas about what should be allowed to exist. The hyena clan had been watching the injured tiger for over a week. Hyenas were not part of the experimental introduction. They'd migrated naturally from a neighboring reserve, following prey animals across porous boundaries. The matriarch, a scarred female the rangers called Duma, had noted Asha's weakness with the cold calculus of an opportunistic hunter. Alone, a healthy tiger was too dangerous, but injured, without a coalition or pride to back her up, she represented possibility. Hyenas didn't often kill large predators, but they would if the odds were favorable enough. More importantly, they would harass and displace, claiming resources and territory through sheer persistent pressure. On the 8th night of Asha's recovery, Duma led 6 clan members to the riverbank territory. They approached in the darkness, their distinctive whooping calls announcing their presence long before they arrived. Asha heard them coming and felt her heart rate spike with ancestral fear. Tigers were solitary ambush predators. They were not built for defending against pack tactics. She struggled to her feet, positioning herself against the acacia trunk, trying to make herself a hard target. Her leg was better, but still weak. She couldn't run, couldn't climb, couldn't do anything but stand and fight if it came to that. Her roar of warning was powerful, but the hyenas knew fear when they heard it, and they knew challenge when they heard it, and this was somewhere in between. They approached in their characteristic loose formation, testing, probing, looking for the angle of attack. Duma hung back, letting her subordinates probe the defenses. 2 hyenas broke left, trying to circle behind the acacia. 3 more came straight up the middle, bold with collective courage. That's when Raja hit them. He'd been sleeping at his mound when the first whoop sounded. He was fully awake and moving before the hyenas came into view, his body positioned between them and Asha before conscious thought could interfere. His roar, when it came, was the full territorial challenge of a male lion in his prime, a sound that carried 3 kilometers and made every animal in range stop and listen. The hyenas faltered. Their calculus had not included a lion. A single injured tiger was one equation. A healthy male lion was another entirely. But they didn't retreat immediately. Hyenas were brave in their own right, and 6 against 1 was still favorable odds. Raja charged. Not a hunting charge, an assertion. He ran directly at the 3 hyenas in the middle, his mane bristling, his body radiating lethal intent. They scattered, but one was too slow. Raja's paw caught it across the shoulder, raking claws through hide and muscle, sending the hyena tumbling with a shriek of pain and surprise. The others regrouped, circling, trying to use their numbers. But Raja had fought with coalition brothers against hyena clans before. He knew their tactics. He kept moving, never letting them settle into position, using his size and power to create chaos in their formation. Behind him, Asha added her voice to his. Deep, sawing roars that told the hyenas they were facing not one predator, but 2. She couldn't fight effectively, but she could make noise, could appear larger and more dangerous than her condition truly allowed. The battle lasted 7 minutes.
Roger injured 2 more hyenas, not killing blows, but painful reminders of the cost of persistence. Finally, Duma made the call. The whoops changed tone, becoming retreat signals. The clan melted back into the darkness, their wounded members limping, their collective pride damaged, but their survival instincts intact. Raja stood in the space between the acacia and the river, his sides heaving, his body still crackling with adrenaline. Blood, not his own, marked his claws. Behind him, Asha lowered herself back down, her leg trembling from the stress of standing ready for combat. He turned to look at her. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something solidified between them. What had been a tentative arrangement, a temporary alliance born of circumstance, became something else, something with weight and commitment. Raja walked to the river, drank, then returned not to his termite mound, but to a spot 10 meters from Asha's acacia, closer than he'd positioned himself before, close enough to respond to threats immediately, far enough to respect her space. He lay down facing outward, toward the direction the hyenas had fled. A guardian's posture, a sentry's commitment. Asha watched him through the darkness, her injured legs stretched out before her, her breathing slowly returning to normal. In her cat's mind, something shifted. She was still wounded, still vulnerable, still alone in all the ways that mattered for a tiger. But she was also, for the first time since her mother's death, not abandoned. The wild had tested them. They had answered together. And the territory, for the moment, was theirs. Part 3. The Revelation and the Fracture. Dr. Sarah Chen had been conducting wildlife research for 15 years, but she'd never written a paper quite like the one she was drafting now. Interspecific cooperative behavior between Panthera leo and Panthera tigris in competitive territory dynamics was the formal title, but what she really wanted to call it was, "What the hell are we watching?" It had been 3 weeks since Asha's injury, and the tiger's recovery had progressed beyond anyone's expectations. She was walking with only a slight limp now, hunting small prey successfully, reclaiming her strength with visible determination. The wound had healed cleanly, leaving a ring of scar tissue that would mark her for life but wouldn't impede her function. By every logical measure, she should have reasserted her solitary territorial behavior. She should have driven Raja away or retreated deeper into her own territory to avoid conflict. Tigers were not wired for coalition living. Instead, she and Raja had developed something unprecedented. Not a pride structure. Asha maintained her independence, hunting alone, sleeping apart. But a parallel existence. 2 predators occupying overlapping territory without the expected violent competition. They hunted separately but shared kills when paths crossed. They maintained distinct resting areas but within visual range of each other. When threats appeared, the hyena clan tried twice more, and once a young male leopard made the mistake of wandering too close, they responded as a unit. "She's teaching him tiger tactics," Priya observed one afternoon, reviewing footage from multiple camera traps. "Watch this sequence. She's stalking that cheetal deer using forest cover, moving in complete silence. He's 50 meters away, watching. The next day, look, he tries the same approach on a water buck. It's not his natural hunting style, but he's mimicking her." And here, Sarah added, pulling up different footage, he's teaching her pride dynamics. She never used to cache kills in trees. Tigers do that sometimes, but not usually here, where leopards are rare. But after watching him drag that impala carcass into the fork of that marula tree to keep it from scavengers, look, 4 days later, she does the same thing with a wild boar. Kedar leaned over their shoulders, watching the screens with the focused intensity of someone who'd spent his entire life reading animal behavior. "They're not becoming the same animal," he said slowly. "They're becoming something new. Each keeping what makes their species successful, but adding tools from each other's survival kit." The scientific community is going to lose their minds over this, Priya said. Sarah nodded, but her expression was troubled. I know, which is why we need to decide what we do when this inevitably ends. You think it will? Biology says it has to. Asha's entering her estrus cycle. The hormonal data from her collar is clear. In less than 2 weeks, she'll be receptive to mating, and her scent is going to broadcast that fact across 50 kilometers. Male tigers will come. They'll challenge Raja for access to her. And Asha, Sarah paused, choosing words carefully. Her instinct will drive her to seek tiger mates, not lions. This detente they've built, I don't see how it survives that. She was right, but not in the ways she anticipated. The first male tiger appeared on the 10th day of Asha's estrus approach. His name, assigned by researchers tracking his movements from a neighboring territory, was Karna, a massive male in his prime, battle-scarred and confident. He'd held his territory against 4 challenges in 3 years. His genetics were considered valuable for the population. He was, by every measure, an ideal mate. He announced his presence with scent marks and roars that echoed across the riverine forest. Asha heard them and felt the deep, instinctive response coded into her DNA. She'd never made it before. Her youth and focus on establishing territory had delayed it. Now her body sang with readiness, with need that overrode logic and gratitude and even memory. She left the acacia grove at dusk, moving towards Karna's calls with single-minded purpose. Raja watched her go, his body tense, his tail lashing in agitation. He made a sound, not quite a roar, not quite a growl, that might have been protest or might have been resignation, but he didn't follow. Tigers mate with violent intensity. The first encounter between Asha and Karna was explosive. Roaring, grappling, a combination of courtship and combat that left both animals bloody and exhausted. They mated 3 times that night in the deep forest, away from the river, away from the cameras, away from the lion who waited in confused agitation by the termite mound. Asha returned at dawn, her body marked with bite wounds and scratches, her movement slow with satisfied exhaustion. The scent of the male tiger was all over her. Raja stood as she approached, and the change in his posture was immediate and stark. His ears flattened, his lip curled. The sound that rumbled from his chest was pure territoriality, the challenge of a male lion confronting an intruder. Asha stopped, confused. The hormonal fog was lifting, and she was beginning to remember the weeks of cooperation, the shared hunts, the mutual defense. But her body still carried the scent of Karna, and to Raja's nose, that scent represented threat and displacement and the loss of something she'd come to value. He charged. Not a full attack, something held him back even in his fury, but a warning rush that sent Asha scrambling backward, her injured leg nearly buckling again. She roared back, defensive and angry and hurt by this sudden rejection. They faced each other across 10 meters of bloodied ground, and all the trust they'd built seemed to evaporate in the sharp morning light. Karna appeared at the forest edge, drawn by the sounds of conflict. He took in the scene with predatory assessment, the female tiger he'd just mated with, the male lion who apparently occupied her territory, the tension crackling between them. His roar was territorial, challenging, a declaration that Asha was his now, that this space was his to claim. Raja's response was immediate and violent. He charged the tiger male with the full rage of a lion defending pride territory, and Karna met him with equal fury. The fight was brutal and brief, 2 massive cats colliding with bone-shaking force, claws raking, teeth seeking purchase. They broke apart after 30 seconds, both bleeding, both reassessing. This wasn't a fight either could win quickly. This was the kind of battle that killed both participants. Asha stood between them, her body language screaming confusion and distress. Part of her, The tiger part, the mate-seeking part, wanted to go to Karna. Part of her, the part that remembered shared kills and defended territory and a lion standing guard through fevered nights, wanted to intervene, to stop this violence. She did neither. She retreated. She ran deeper into her territory, away from both males, away from the impossible choice her instincts were demanding she make. Her leg ached with the stress, old pain flaring new. She ran until she reached a rocky outcrop 2 kilometers from the river, a place she'd used as a den site in her youth, before her mother's death, before the territorial wars with her sisters, before the snare and the lion and everything that had complicated the simple mathematics of survival. She stayed there for 3 days, listening to the sounds of conflict in the distance. Raja and Karna fought twice more, brief, violent exchanges that established neither dominance nor submission, only mutual respect for each other's lethality. The male tiger eventually retreated to the forest edge, maintaining a presence but not pushing into the core riverbank territory. Raja reclaimed his position at the termite mound, but his demeanor had changed. The relaxed confidence was gone, replaced by hyper-vigilant aggression. The rangers watched all of this with growing concern. The behavior data was fascinating, but it was also clearly unsustainable. Sarah called an emergency meeting with the conservation board to discuss options. "We can't interfere," insisted Dr. Rajesh Patel, the project director. "This is nature. This is exactly what we're here to observe, how these species interact without human manipulation." "With all respect," Sarah countered, "this entire zone is human manipulation. We put these animals together. We created this situation. And now it's falling apart in ways that could end with dead animals and compromised research. What do you propose? Temporary relocation of the male tiger, give Asha's estrus cycle time to complete, let hormones return to baseline, see if she and Raja can re-establish their equilibrium. That's still interference. Not relocating is also a choice that might result in escalating violence." The debate continued for 2 hours with no clear resolution. Science, ethics, conservation goals, and practical reality all pulled in different directions. Finally, Kedar, who'd been silent throughout, spoke up. "What if we let her decide?" Everyone turned to look at him. "She's removed herself from both males. She's in a holding pattern. What if we simply wait, see which direction she moves? If she goes to the forest, to Karna, we know her choice. If she returns to the river, to Raja, we know that too. We're not deciding for her. We're just reading what she's already decided." It was anthropomorphism, assigning decision-making capacity and emotional complexity to a tiger. It was also, Sarah had to admit, the least interventionist approach available. They waited. On the 4th day of Asha's self-imposed isolation, the rains came. Not the monsoon, that was still weeks away, but a violent afternoon storm that turned the savannah into a thunderscape of lightning and sheeting water. Asha had no shelter at the rocky outcrop. She was exposed, miserable, the storm soaking through her fur and chilling her to the bone. She thought of the acacia grove. She thought of the forest where Karna waited. And she made her choice. She began to walk. Part 4. The Return and the Trial. The storm had transformed the landscape into something primordial, all electricity and water and wind that bent the grass flat and turned the dry riverbeds into rushing arteries. Asha moved through it like a ghost, her body low, her fur plastered to her frame, her injured legs stiff with cold and old damage. Each step was a negotiation between what her body could do and what her mind demanded. She was heading toward the river, toward the acacia grove, toward Raja. She didn't analyze the choice, couldn't have, even if tiger consciousness permitted such abstract reasoning. She only knew that the rocky outcrop felt like abandonment, that the forest with Karna felt like duty without comfort, and that the riverbank felt like something she couldn't name but desperately needed. Raja had spent 4 days in a state of agitated vigilance. He'd hunted, but barely. He'd slept in brief, restless intervals, always waking with his ears pricked toward the sounds of the forest where he knew the male tiger lurked. His body carried fresh wounds from their fights, a deep scratch across his shoulder, a bite mark on his foreleg, claw marks along his ribs. Nothing life-threatening, but painful reminders of conflict unresolved. When Asha's scent reached him through the rain, faint, diluted by water, but unmistakable, his entire body stiffened. He stood from his position beneath a fever tree where he'd been sheltering and walked out into the storm. His mane was immediately soaked, heavy with water, but he didn't care. His eyes fixed on the direction from which her scent came, his body rigid with anticipation and uncertainty. She emerged from the curtain of rain like an apparition, thin, exhausted, her orange and black stripes darkened to near uniformity by the water. She stopped 30 meters from him, swaying slightly, and they looked at each other across the rain-swept space between them. Neither moved for what felt like an eternity. The storm raged around them, turning the world into a gray chaos of water and wind. Lightning illuminated them in stark, stuttering frames, the lion standing firm, the tiger hesitating. Then Asha took a step forward. Another. Another, not rushing, not cringing, just closing the distance with slow deliberation. Raja remained motionless, letting her come to him, understanding on some level that this needed to be her choice, her movement, her affirmation. When she was 10 meters away, the distance they'd maintained through most of their partnership, she stopped. She made a sound, low and questioning, neither roar nor growl, a vocalization that carried query and vulnerability in equal measure. Raja answered, not with aggression, not with territory claim, but with the deep, rumbling contact call that lions used with pride members. Recognition, acceptance, return. Asha closed the final distance. She walked past him, not stopping, not touching, just walking past in that peculiar feline way that said more than contact could. She walked to the acacia grove, to her familiar resting spot, and she lay down in the mud and rain with her head on her paws, her eyes watching him. Raja followed, not to the acacia, that was hers, but to his position 10 meters away, the guardian's distance, the sentry's post. He settled into the mud with the solid weight of permanence and resumed his watch outward, toward the forest, toward threats, toward the world beyond their small shared territory. The storm raged through the night. They both stayed, soaked and cold and stubbornly present. By dawn, the rain had stopped, leaving the savanna washed clean and gleaming. The first sun broke through clouds the color of bruises and turned every drop of water into a diamond. Karna appeared at the forest edge just after sunrise. He'd heard Asha's return, scented her presence back in the riverbank territory. His roar echoed across the grassland, territorial, imperious, demanding. Asha heard it and felt the hormonal tug, the biological imperative that had driven her to him days before. But the estrus was fading now, the peak passing, and with it came clarity that lust had temporarily obscured. She stood, water dripping from her fur, and moved to stand beside Raja, not behind him, not as a protected mate, but alongside him as an equal partner. It was a statement to the male tiger, a clarification of choice. This was her territory. Raja was her what? Not mate, not pride, something else. Karna roared again, angry and frustrated. He was the superior genetic specimen, the more appropriate mate, the tiger male who should, by all rights, claim the tiger female. But he was also an animal of instinct and learned behavior, and every instinct told him that what he saw before him, a female tiger and male lion standing together in unified territorial defense, was a combination he couldn't defeat. He could fight one. He'd proven that in his battles with Raja. But both? The math was impossible. He held his position at the forest edge through the morning, roaring periodically, marking trees, making his presence known. But he didn't advance into the core territory. By afternoon, his roars came from farther away. By evening, they'd ceased entirely. He'd moved on, seeking more accessible mating opportunities, following the pragmatic calculus that governed all wild predators. Energy spent must equal energy gained, and this equation no longer balanced. Raja and Asha remained at the riverbank. As the day progressed and the land dried, something in their dynamic shifted again. The tension of the mating period, the fury of the male confrontation, the days of separation, all of it was behind them now. What remained was simpler and somehow more profound. That afternoon, Asha hunted successfully for the first time since her return. A young waterbuck taken with the efficient throat clamp that was signature tiger technique. She dragged the kill to a spot between her acacia and Raja's termite mound, the neutral ground they'd established weeks ago, and fed. Raja approached when she'd had her fill and took his portion without challenge or defense. They were re-establishing the pattern, but it was different now, stronger, tested. There was a visible ease in their movements around each other, a comfort that hadn't existed before the fracture, as if breaking and choosing to return had somehow validated what had been built, transforming tentative alliance into something with deeper foundation. The Rangers watched this reunion with scientific fascination and personal relief. Sarah had been afraid they'd destroyed something irreplaceable through inaction, or that Asha's biological imperatives would permanently override the learned cooperation. Instead, they'd witnessed something rarer, animals making choices that balanced instinct with experience, biology with behavior. She chose partnership over mating, Priya said, reviewing the footage. Not exactly, Sarah corrected gently. She chose both in sequence. She mated with Karna, that biological need was met. But she returned here, to Raja, for everything else. For territory, for security, for companionship, maybe, if that word even applies. Can tigers get pregnant from 3 mating encounters? Kedar asked. Possibly, Sarah said. We won't know for several weeks. If she is, that adds another layer of complexity to all of this. But that concern was for the future. For now, there was peace in the riverbank territory. The hyena clan had retreated to easier hunting grounds. The male tiger had departed. The rains had refilled the water sources and greened the grassland. Prey animals moved through in abundance. It was, by all measures, an optimal period for predators. Asha's leg had fully healed, leaving only the scar as a reminder. She'd regained all her former strength and grace. She could have, perhaps should have, expanded her territory, pushed outward into unclaimed areas, followed the solitary imperative of her species. Instead, she stayed in the riverbank area, in loose but constant association with the lion who'd chosen not to kill her when killing would have been easy. They developed routines. Morning hunts, separate but often simultaneous. Afternoon rest in their respective spots within visual range. Evening patrols of the territory boundaries, sometimes together, sometimes solo. Night vigilance shared. When one killed, the other ate. When one rested, the other watched. It was partnership stripped of sentiment, built purely on practical benefit, and yet it carried an undercurrent of something that looked remarkably like trust. 3 weeks after Asha's return, something unexpected happened. A group of wildlife photographers, properly permitted and ranger-escorted, arrived to document the famous lion-tiger partnership. The conservation zone had kept the situation relatively quiet, wanting to study it without external pressure. But word had leaked through scientific channels. Now, with proper protocols in place, they'd allowed limited observation. The photographers set up at a respectful distance, using long lenses and hides to minimize disturbance. They captured images that would eventually appear in nature magazines worldwide. The tiger and lion drinking from the same waterhole, separated by 10 meters but undeniably together. The lion standing watch while the tiger slept. The tiger sharing her kill with the lion. The two of them silhouetted at sunset, apex predators in parallel existence. On the third day of the photo shoot, something went wrong. One of the photographers, a young man named James, who'd been working in wildlife documentation for less than a year, broke protocol. He saw what he thought was the perfect shot, Asha grooming herself in golden morning light, and moved forward from the hide, trying to close the distance for a better angle. Asha saw him immediately. A human, on foot, approaching. Every instinct screamed threat.
She'd been darted by humans, handled by humans, invaded by humans during her recovery. The association was not positive. Her ears flattened, her body coiled. The growl that emanated from her chest was pure warning. Raja, resting 30 meters away, was on his feet instantly. He saw the human advancing toward Asha, saw her defensive posture, and made a decision that the Rangers later agreed probably saved the photographer's life. He charged past Asha, placing himself between her and the human, and released a roar that was earth-shaking in its fury. It wasn't a kill roar. If Raja had wanted to kill the photographer, he would have done so silently, efficiently. This was pure intimidation, a sound designed to freeze prey in place through terror alone. It worked. James stopped dead, his camera falling to his side, his body locked in fear. The other photographers and rangers rushed forward, shouting, trying to create noise and confusion that would give James time to retreat. But it was Raja who controlled the situation. He stood between the human and Asha, his body language aggressive but not attacking, until James finally found his legs and stumbled backward toward the safety of the vehicles. When the humans had retreated, when the vehicles had departed in a cloud of dust and mutual recrimination, Raja returned to Asha. She was still tense, still agitated by the human presence. He approached closer than he usually did, within 5 meters, and made that same rumbling contact call he'd used during the storm. Reassurance, solidarity. Asha's body slowly relaxed. Her ears came forward. She looked at the lion, and something passed between them that the cameras had not captured, that human observation could not quantify. Gratitude, perhaps. Recognition, certainly. The acknowledgement that he had defended her from a threat that wasn't about territory or food or mating, but simply about her well-being. That night, for the first time since they'd met, Asha moved her sleeping position. Instead of the acacia grove, she settled near the termite mound, not at it, but nearer, close enough that if threats came in the darkness, they would face them from adjacent positions rather than separated ones. Raja adjusted his position to maintain the proper distance, but his posture as he settled was different, more relaxed, more at home, as if something he'd been waiting for had finally arrived. The stars emerged in their countless thousands. The night sounds built their familiar symphony, and two predators who should have been enemies slept in careful proximity, their territories overlapping, their lives intertwined, their futures uncertain, but their present moment inexplicably peaceful. In the ranger station, Sarah wrote in her personal journal, not the scientific notes, but the thoughts she couldn't put in papers. I think I understand now. They're not friends. They're not mates. They're not pride or coalition. They're two individuals who found in each other something they needed more than territory or food or biological imperatives. They found witness, someone to acknowledge that survival, while solitary, doesn't have to be lonely. That's not anthropomorphism. That's just truth, wearing fur. Part 5. The Resolution and Renewal. The monsoon came early that year, transforming the conservation zone into a study in green and gray. The dry riverbeds became torrents. The grasslands became marshes. The animals adapted or moved,
following ancient patterns coded into their migrations. For Asha and Raja, the rains meant different challenges than either had faced before. Raja had never experienced monsoon in territory without pride support. Lions were social for reasons beyond companionship. They were social because collective survival worked better than solitary struggle. During floods, prides could afford to wait out the worst weather in dry caves or under thick canopies, with multiple members to hunt when conditions allowed. A lone male had no such buffer. Asha, conversely, was built for this. Tigers were adapted to forested, watery environments. The rain was her element, the undergrowth her camouflage. But even she struggled with the intensity of the monsoon that year. The rivers that raged where gentle streams had been. The mud that sucked at paws and made pursuit hunting nearly impossible. They adapted by adapting to each other. Asha found a cave system in the rocky outcrop where she'd hidden during her self-imposed exile. It was tiger-sized, tight spaces, low ceilings, narrow entrance, but it was dry and defensible. She couldn't have shared it with another tiger. Tigers needed personal space even in bad weather. But she could share it with a lion who, for his part, had never considered caves suitable den sites, but was willing to learn. They sheltered there during the worst of the storms, lying in the darkness while water sheeted down outside. Two massive cats in a space barely large enough for one. They didn't cuddle, nothing so domestic as that. They simply existed in parallel, their body heat mingling, their breathing falling into unconscious synchronization. During breaks in the weather, they hunted. The flooded grasslands had concentrated prey animals onto islands of higher ground, creating what amounted to natural corrals. Asha taught Raja how to move through water. Tigers were excellent swimmers. Lions were adequate but reluctant. He learned to approach prey through shallow floods, using the water to muffle his approach. She learned from him how to use teamwork in the hunt, one circling, one driving, both converging. Their success rate during the monsoon was higher than either could have achieved alone. They ate well despite the difficult conditions. And something else happened, something the Rangers documented with growing wonder. They began to play. Not often, not with the exuberance of cubs, but occasionally, during rain breaks when the world was fresh and clean, they would engage in brief moments of non-survival behavior. Asha would ambush Raja from tall grass, a mock pounce that he'd deflect with a swat of his massive paw. He would steal a stick she'd been batting around and carry it in his mouth until she chased him. Brief moments, 30 seconds, a minute, that looked remarkably like joy. "Tigers don't play as adults," Priya said, watching the footage in disbelief. "Neither do solo male lions," Kedar added. "Play is social bonding behavior. It requires trust and security. They shouldn't have that with each other." "And yet," Sarah said, for what felt like the 100th time since this all began. The monsoon lasted 6 weeks. When it finally broke and the sun returned in full force, the conservation zone had changed. The vegetation was lush. New prey animals had been born, taking advantage of abundant food. The predator-prey balance had shifted, creating new opportunities and new challenges. Asha's body had also changed. Her abdomen was swollen, her movements more deliberate. The ranger team confirmed what they'd suspected since her mating with Karna 2 months prior. She was pregnant. The gestation period for tigers was approximately 15 weeks. She was past halfway. "This changes everything," Dr. Patel said during the emergency meeting Sarah called. "Pregnant tigers are aggressive, territorial, and solitary. She'll need a secure den site, away from all other predators, including Raja. Nature will drive them apart now. It has to." But nature had already proven surprisingly flexible when it came to these two. Asha did become more aggressive as her pregnancy progressed. Her patience for Raja's presence decreased. The easy tolerance they developed gave way to more rigid boundaries. She spent more time alone, exploring potential den sites, her instincts driving her toward the deep forest where Karna had courted her, tiger territory suitable for tiger cubs. Raja noticed the change. His confused agitation was visible in his body language, his increased scent marking, his restless pacing. He didn't understand pregnancy in any conceptual way, but he understood that Asha was different, that she was moving away from him, that the pattern they'd built was fragmenting. He didn't follow her into the forest. Some instinct, or perhaps learned wisdom, told him that would be unwelcome. Instead, he maintained the riverbank territory, hunting, patrolling, waiting. His behavior suggested expectation, though whether animals could truly expect in any meaningful sense was a question Sarah couldn't answer. Asha found her den site in a cave system deep in the forest, 3 kilometers from the riverbank. It was perfect. Hidden entrance, multiple chambers, good sightlines for watching approaches. She prepared it with typical tiger thoroughness, clearing debris, establishing scent marks, memorizing every stone and shadow. She gave birth on a night of exceptional stillness. 3 cubs, 2 females, 1 male. Tiny, blind, helpless. She cleaned them with rough tongue strokes and guided them to nurse, her fierce maternal instinct now the dominant force in her psychology. For the first week, she barely left the den, surviving on stored body fat and the remains of a kill she'd cached nearby before labor. The rangers tracked her through her collar, respecting her need for privacy, but monitoring for complications. None arose. Asha was a capable mother, attentive and protective. The cubs thrived. But on the 8th day after birth, something unexpected happened. A male leopard, young and ambitious, discovered the den. Leopards and tigers competed for resources in overlapping habitats. Adult tigers could kill leopards easily, but a mother with newborn cubs was vulnerable, distracted, defensive rather than offensive, unable to pursue threats away from the den site. The leopard approached at dusk, drawn by the scent of milk and blood and new life. Asha heard him coming and moved to the den entrance, her body blocking access, her roar shaking leaves from trees. The leopard paused but didn't flee. He'd seen that she was nursing, that she couldn't leave the cubs to chase him. He began to circle, looking for an angle of approach. Asha was trapped by biology. She couldn't fight effectively while protecting 3 helpless cubs. She couldn't flee. The cubs couldn't travel. She could only stand and threaten and hope that her reputation and size would be enough to drive him off. It wasn't. The leopard was desperate, driven by hunger and territorial ambition to take risks that survival instinct would normally prohibit. He feinted left, then darted right, trying to find a way past the tiger mother's defense. That's when Raja arrived. He'd heard Asha's roars from 3 kilometers away. He'd begun moving toward them immediately, not understanding why, not analyzing the choice, just responding to a sound that meant danger and a creature that meant something. He'd run through the forest at full speed, crashing through undergrowth, following scent and sound and some pull he couldn't name. He burst into the clearing fronting the den with his mane bristling and fury in every line of his body. The leopard turned, saw the male lion, and made the instant calculation that his life was worth more than this opportunity. He fled into the canopy, vanishing with the liquid grace his species was known for. Raja stood in the clearing, his sides heaving, his eyes on Asha. She was at the den entrance, her body still defensive, her cubs hidden behind her. They looked at each other across 10 meters of forest floor, and everything they'd built over months of shared territory hung in the balance of this moment. Asha's growl was low, warning. Her instinct said, "Threat to cubs, all threats must be driven away, including this one." But her memory said, "This threat saved you, shared with you, stood with you against others." Her body was rigid with conflict between imperative and experience. Raja didn't approach. He simply stood, his posture relaxing from aggression to neutrality. Then he did something that the hidden trail camera captured in extraordinary detail. He sat down. The universal feline signal of non-aggression, of peaceful intent. He sat in the clearing facing the den, and he waited. Asha's growl faded. Her body slowly lost its defensive rigidity. She looked at him for a long moment, then did something equally unprecedented. She turned her back on him, not in dismissal or insult, but in trust. She retreated into the den, back to her cubs, leaving the clearing undefended, because she understood, on whatever level tigers understand such things, that Raja was not a threat to be guarded against. He remained there through the night, sitting, then lying, always facing outward toward the forest, standing guard over a den that held cubs that weren't his, protecting a female who'd chosen another male's genetics but somehow still claimed space in his behavioral patterns. At dawn, Asha emerged from the den alone. The cubs were sleeping, safe in the darkness. She walked to where Raja lay and stopped 3 meters from him. They regarded each other in the gray pre-dawn light. Then Asha made a sound, a soft chuff, the contact call tigers used between mothers and cubs, between siblings, between individuals who'd established bonds of acceptance. Raja answered with his rumbling vocalization, acknowledgement, understanding. Asha returned to her den. Raja remained in the clearing. And a new pattern began to establish itself. The tiger mother with her cubs inside, the lion guardian outside, a defensive perimeter that made no evolutionary sense and perfect practical sense simultaneously. The rangers debated intervention again. Lions killed cubs that weren't their own. It was fundamental pride behavior, a way to bring females back into estrus faster. But Raja showed no aggression toward the den, no interest in infanticide. He hunted nearby, bringing kills close enough that Asha could make quick feeding trips without traveling far from the cubs. He drove away potential threats. The leopard returned twice more and was chased off both times.